Alright, so in this video we are going to get started with the database for our Next.js application. Okay, so the database which we will be using is MySQL. Okay, so initially I spoke about using SQLite with our application, but we do not have any user interface for me to show you like what's happening behind the scenes, like within our database. And also it is very difficult to scale when you are building this to a large scale. So that's why I just decided to shift back to MySQL, and also I can just show you what is actually happening. All right, so I apologize for that confusion which I made a video on explaining the demo of this application. All right, so let's now go to the official page of MySQL, and we can right now go ahead and download MySQL Workbench. All right, and also we will be using an external mechanism so that we can talk to our database. So that's called as an ORM. Okay, so it's called as object relational mapping, and we can which is used to communicate with the database with simple JavaScript syntax. Okay, so we will talk more on that later after we set up our database in the same video. And so to get started, we need to make sure that we have MySQL Workbench installed. All right, so you can just head over to MySQL Workbench on Google, and we have to download the software for our operating system, whichever you are using. So you can just select which OS you are using, so it will be default selected whichever you are using, and just download the latest one. Okay, so if you just click on download, so your download will start, and you can follow the process for the installation. Okay, so since I already have this downloaded in my machine, so I'm not going to do that. So once that's done, we also need to install the server, MySQL server, so that we can interact with our database. So that will also expose a port where we need to set up within our backend, and make sure that everything is connected and we are good to go. All right, so we can just search for MySQL server download on Google, and we can just click on the link, and this page shows up. Okay, so we need to select again your operating system and the version. Okay, so make sure you download the latest version. All right, so this is like about 500 MB where you can download it and follow the process to install. So in case you get stuck anywhere, you can just watch any tutorial like how to set up MySQL on your machine. So by that you can get this done. Okay, so there are a lot of videos, so I also just saw those and only installed. Okay, so once you are successfully installed, you can open up your terminal. Okay, I am just using the Visual Studio Code, and we can just type in the following command to exactly check if MySQL is properly installed or not. Okay, so for that you can just type in the command like MySQL -u, that is stands for username. So whatever username you have given, you need to type that. So in my case it's root, and also -p. Okay, so this will also ask your password, which you need to type in. Okay, so once you type in your password, you should get a message like this, like welcome to the MySQL monitor. And if you see something like this, that means that your MySQL server is up and running, and you are good to go with the next process. All right, so let me just exit this. All right, so now is the time where we need to set up the ORM. Okay, so the ORM which we will be using is Prisma. Okay, so Prisma is like a open source free software where we can use to communicate with our relational databases. Okay, like MySQL, Postgres, and all that. So I can just show you that by going to the official documentation. So this is the official documentation of Prisma. Okay, so it says that we simply by whatever. Okay, so we can just click on get started, and we need to see how we can set this up within our project. Okay, so click on start from scratch, and also you can do the same with MongoDB, but Mongoose is the most popular ORM or ODM for MongoDB, so I didn't know about that. So you can also click on connect your database, so it gives us a clear-cut instructions how do we actually need to set up with our MySQL database. Okay, or any relational database for that matter. So we need to create a file called prisma.schema, the schema.prisma, okay, my bad. And once we do that, we need to write a variable like data source, okay. So this is like completely different programming. This is not a programming language but a set of instructions for Prisma to identify what is our database configuration. So we need to set up the provider. So here it's Postgres, but we need, in our case it is MySQL, and we need to provide the database URL, okay, which we will be setting up within our .env file, okay. Open the terminal, and we need to make sure that we have Prisma installed first of all, okay. So let us install that from our node package manager, and this will be a dev dependency, okay. So Prisma, let's wait for it. Alright, so that's done, and using the Prisma CLI we can generate the Prisma file, okay. So for that we can type in npx prisma init, okay, and dash data source provider, and we need to specify the data source provider, that is MySQL, okay. So MySQL and hit enter, okay. So you see that we get a file over here by a folder by the name Prisma, and within that we get some boilerplate code for our schema.prisma, okay. So in this file we define all of the schema of our project, like the what is that, the properties, the users and messages and all that, okay. So you see that the provider is here MySQL, and the URL is by the environment variable called database URL, okay. So let's now create the file, okay. So it has already created a .env file by default, so we just need to customize this piece of string, okay. So we need to replace this by your actual username. So in my case it is root, and you just need to like type in your password. So let me just type in mine, okay, and then the port, okay. So by default it is running on port 3306, okay, and we need to give this your name of your database, okay. So let's call this easy homes. Alright, so that's done. So let's now go ahead and create our schema, right? So let's do that. So let us now start creating the schema for our properties, okay. So before we start, let us make sure we have the Prisma extension installed, okay. So we can just go to the extensions tab and type in Prisma, and we just need to install the Prisma the IntelliSense, okay. So this will give us some IntelliSense and a little bit of indentation, okay, within our Prisma file, okay. So this will help us a lot in that, and once that's done, we can just create our very first model. So by defining the namespace model, and let me just disable this model, and let's call this property, okay. And within that, the first thing is the ID, okay. So this will be the primary key, okay. So this is of the type integer, and you also get some IntelliSense. So if you want, you can also use UUIDs for that matter, okay. So I'm using integer, and this will be the primary key for the properties model, okay. So you can write this by @ID, okay, and we don't have to specify the ID. So for every property we create, the ID will increment on itself, okay. So for that we can use the default, okay, and this will be auto increment like so, okay. So it's very easy. So it will give you some suggestions also, and okay, so let's start building the next, and there will be the name of the property, and this is going to be of type string, and yeah, that's it. So once you save this file, it will auto indent, okay. So you see that it auto indented, and next is the description, and this is going to be of type string, okay. So and this is going to be optional, okay. So either if you would like to give a description for the property or not, and this is going to be a text field property, okay. So by default it is varchar or something. So we need to mention this as db.text field, okay. So this will be a long form of text, okay, and then the type model, the type, and then we are going to give this a enum type, okay. So we can only choose either one among the following. So we can just type in the variable called type, and for this we need to explicitly define another variable for enums. Okay, so we can specify enum and then pass in this particular type, and inside that we can just give it either for is it for rent or is it for sale. Okay, so rent, okay, then sale, like this. And once that's done, now we can just move on. Okay, so it's always a convention that we capitalize the enum types. Okay, so you can also, if you also see other videos, it's also capitalized, so I'm just sticking to that. And let's give the price of the property. So that is going to be of type float value. And then we have the street, for the location, string. Then the same for the city. I'm just going to duplicate these, city, then the state, and then the zip code. Okay, so zip code is going to be a integer, or you can also keep it string. Okay, so string is the actual type for this, because if we use integer, it will take in a lot of memory. We do not know like how long will be the zip code. And then we have is the BHK, so the number of bedrooms, halls, and kitchen. So again, this is going to be of type, this is going to be an enum type. So let's define that here, or maybe I can and we can just specify 1 BHK, and I can just duplicate this, 2 BHK, okay, and also let's specify a 1 room kitchen. Okay, so there are even properties with a room and a kitchen. So once that's done, then we can specify the area. So this is going to be integer, and then the parking, so either yes or no. Again, this is going to be an enum type. Either there is parking or no. Okay, yes or no. Okay, so maybe a space is required. Yeah, and then we have is the images. Okay, so we have different kind of images for our properties. Okay, so this images itself will be a foreign key to which will refer the images model. Okay, so we can just type in the images. Okay, so later we are going to do this. Okay, so then we can set the preferred tenants, and this is also going to be of type preferred tenants. Okay, an enum type, and property type. Sorry guys if this is a little boring, because we need to do it right. Either if you want, you can just copy paste this, or you can just follow along with me. Okay, and available from. Okay, so this is going to be a date time field. Okay, and then we have is the is featured, so if the property is featured or not. Okay, so this is going to be a boolean this time. All right, and then we need to set this by default as false. Okay, so we do not have to explicitly mention that this is not a featured property or featured. So by default it is going to be false, and if you want later we can just set this true to true. Okay, so and then we have is the property of is sold. Again, this is going to be a boolean where the default value is going to be false. Next we have is the the owner of the property, and this is going to be again which will refer the user model. Okay, so I'll just type in the user like so, and then we have the message, which will be of type message. Okay, so message will contain various properties like sender, receiver, when was it sent, and which property is it associated with, and all of that. So message, and this will be building it later. Okay, so I'll just comment this out, and then finally we have the created at and updated at. Okay, so this will be of type timestamp. So created at, and this is again going to be a date time, and by default it is going to be the timestamp when we are creating a record. Okay, so by default it's going to be now. Okay, so this will give us a timestamp for created at, and also the same for updated at. Alright, date time field, by default it is going to be updated at. Okay, so whenever we update a record, so we have a type for that, and this will update the record for that. By default it is null, so we don't have to specify that. Okay, so our property is done. So we finally need to fill in this enum type. So I just left it blank, just to go back and forth. So let's complete that up, and we have the preferred tenants. I guess I spelled this wrong. Okay, so this is going to be either for family or bachelors. All right, and then the property type. Okay, either it's for like is it an apartment, is it either an apartment or an independent house. So enum property type. All right, so also if you want you can add in villa, but just 2 is enough. All right, so then we have is the, did we miss out anything? Yeah, it's just the images and then the user. Okay, so images, let's define the type for that, or the model for images. And for the images model we get the, of course, the ID, which will be the primary key, and by default it is going to be an ID and auto increment, default auto increment. All right, and then we have is the URL. Okay, so something's wrong, I guess. Sorry, this is not an enum, so model, my bad. And then we have the URL of the image. Okay, so the URL will be the Cloudinary URL that we will be storing in our database, and then we will be displaying that image based on that URL. So this is going to be a string, and then the property, which property is this image associated with, and also this is going to be a foreign key. Okay, so now is the time to analyze like the foreign keys between different models of our table. Okay, so this property is going to refer the property model. Okay, like so, and we need to specify the relation, like is it one to one or one to many, so that relation. So relation, and we need to specify the fields. So what field is referencing what. Okay, so we need to type in fields, and this is going to be an array where we need to since it is referring the property ID, we need to type in the property ID. All right, and then the references. Okay, so references, then the ID. So this ID, the images ID, and then we need to also specify on delete. So if we delete a property or an image, so what it has to do. So on delete means we are going to set up as cascade. So if which means that if we delete a property, all the associated images related to the property will also be deleted. Cascade, and also we need to specify the type of the property ID. Okay, so this property ID over here. Okay, so and this is going to be an integer. Okay, so once you save that, that will auto format, and yeah, so only thing is left is the user. Okay, so the owner is the owner of the property will be of type user. Okay, so we also need to create a model for user. So let us create that for user, and now this model is of course going to have a ID of type integer, and by default it is going to be auto incremented. Okay, and then what's wrong? Sorry, this is going to be id, sorry, not db. Then we have is the email of the user, so which is going to be of type string, and this is going to be unique. Okay, so we need to specify the attribute of unique, you see over here, and which means that if we try to enter any other record which the email is already there, so it is going to throw an error. Okay, so of course emails are always unique. And then the username. Okay, so all of this information will be coming from the Google Auth, which we will be implementing later, and the image of the user. Okay, so this is going to be of type string, and this is optional. And then the saved properties. Okay, so user can also save properties, right? So we need to also store the saved properties, the property IDs, so that we can display the saved properties in that particular screen. So let's mention saved properties. So this is going to be an array of properties. Okay, so property, and then specify an array over here, which means that there will be multiple properties related to this user. And then we have is the finally the created at. Okay, so maybe you can just copy paste from here. Okay, so that's done. And yeah, so only thing is we just need to give a relation from the property to the user. Okay, so let's just do that. So we have the relation, so let's give that relation. So for relation we can just copy this piece of code and then paste it here. Okay, and this time it's going to be owner ID and not property ID. And let's also specify the owner ID over here. That is going to be of integer type, and we do not want to delete any user if property is deleted. Okay, so let's get rid of that. And yeah, so this is an error here, and it says that so one-to-one relation must use unique fields on defining side. Okay, so either use an @unique to the field property ID or change the relation one to many. Okay, so this makes sense actually. So we need to just make this attribute a unique attribute. Okay, so that is why, and this is going to be an array of images. Okay, so yeah, so all our errors are disappeared. So everything is looking good right now. So we are leaving the message model later when we come to the message part of the video. Okay, so I do not want to like mix everything in just one video and make you confused. So I can just get rid of this and come back to this later. Okay, so right now our Prisma schema is ready. Only thing is we need to just migrate this Prisma file to readable SQL format. Okay, so our SQL database cannot read this file. Okay, so we just need to transpile this code into SQL commands. So for that we have a command. We need to use the Prisma CLI to generate a migration file so that our SQL file can read our commands. Okay, so we can type in the following command, that is npx prisma migrate dev. Okay, so once you hit enter, it's going to ask you for the name of the migration. Okay, so every migration will be need to given a name. So once you hit that, so if you do not have your database set up yet, so it's going to give you an error. Okay, so since mine is already set up and working fine, it's not giving any error. So let's give the name for our migration. So I'll just call it init and hit enter. So you see that it has automatically created a folder for you called migrations. Okay, so if you just go into this file and you see that this is created one particular migration file, and it is by the name _init. You can just see in the folder name, and inside that we have the actual migration.sql file. Okay, so this is a complete SQL file for our database to understand. Okay, so once this is done, you can just also go back to your database and actually check if the particular table is being created or not. Okay, and this is some other file, a toml file, which you don't have to touch it. And yeah, so now let's go back to our MySQL Workbench and check if try to connect to our database. Okay, so if it is actually working or not. So once if you have installed MySQL Workbench successfully, you can just open the app. So you will see an interface like this, where you will initially see nothing. Okay, for then once we since we have right now created the migration, we can go ahead and test this. Okay, so we can just click on this plus icon to create a new database connection, and we can just call this the connection name that we set up, that is Easy Homes. Okay, so I just called this easyhomes-youtube for my reference, and the host name is going to be localhost, and later we are going to change this once we host our database. And the port is by default 3306, and the username is root. And once we click on test connection, it's going to ask us for the password that we set up while installing MySQL Workbench. Okay, and also the username, it would have also prompted you what will be the username. So by default I have kept that as root, and I will type in my following password. Okay, so once it's done, so it says that the successful connection to MySQL database, and gives us all the information. Okay, and once I click OK, it is going to you see created a new database connection. So if I click on that, okay, so we have already created this. And so if we expand this, you see tables, we have already the property, user, and the images, the tables that we have created. Okay, so these are all like having the foreign keys that are mapped to each other. And if we just see the properties, for now we do not have anything. Okay, so it is just a simple command like select star from the table name, and then the the database name, and then the table name. Okay, so it's the same for the images and user. Okay, so in the next video we will be importing some sample or some dummy data into a database, so that we can just play around and just test things if everything is working and to build the actual application. Okay, so we need some data to play around with. So let's create a seeder script, so that we can just create a file, and then with a run of a command, which will import all the existing data that we create to the database. Okay, so we will be doing that in the next video.